The journey began on a hot afternoon when I decided to take a taxi out toward the desert. The sun was blazing overhead, and the road seemed endless as we drove further away from the city and into the barren silence. At first, the driver was quiet, glancing at me now and then through the rearview mirror. I kept telling myself it was nothing, just part of his nature, but the longer the drive continued, the more I felt his eyes linger with a strange kind of curiosity. The taxi's old engine rattled, and the empty landscape stretched like a canvas of sand and stone. My phone's signal had long disappeared, and the realization that I was completely cut off from everything left me uneasy. Still, I stayed calm, trying to enjoy the ride, convincing myself that maybe I just needed the escape. The driver occasionally asked me questions: where I was from, why I was going so far, if someone was waiting for me. His tone carried more than casual interest, but I responded politely, not wanting to seem rude. As the kilometers passed, the silence between us became heavier. It wasn't just the desert pressing in from all sides. It was something in the way he looked back at me, a strange mix of curiosity and intention. The road narrowed, and finally, without warning, he pulled the car to the side and let the engine die. The sudden stillness of the desert wrapped around us like a shroud. The only sounds were the ticking of the cooling engine and the low whistle of the wind brushing over the sand. I asked why we had stopped, but his answer was vague. He muttered something about needing a break, his voice low, as if hiding something more. My heartbeat quickened, not only from fear but from the tension of being stranded with him in the middle of nowhere. His eyes met mine in the rear view, steady and unblinking, as though the desert itself had trapped us together in that fragile moment. What began as a simple ride had shifted into something far more complicated, and I could feel the first stirrings of a story I had never imagined myself a part of. The silence inside the car felt louder than the desert wind outside. I shifted uneasily in my seat, trying to read his expression, but the driver's face remained unreadable. He opened the door slowly, stepped out, and stretched as though nothing was wrong. The sun was lowering now, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, and the thought of being left in the middle of nowhere filled me with unease. He leaned against the car and lit a cigarette, his eyes never leaving me. I wanted to tell him to keep driving, to remind him I had somewhere to be, but my words caught in my throat. It wasn't fear alone. It was the way he carried himself, calm yet unpredictable, like someone who already knew I had no other choice but to depend on him. When he finally slid back into the driver's seat, he didn't start the engine. Instead, he turned slightly, studying me as though he had been waiting for this exact moment. The air between us grew heavy, and I could feel a storm rising quietly beneath the surface. My chest tightened, unsure whether it was anger, nervousness, or something I didn't want to admit. That I tried to look out the window, but his voice pulled me back. He asked personal questions this time, not the harmless chatter from earlier, but things that touched too close to the truth. Was I happy with my life? Did I feel lonely? His tone was probing, and it felt like he was peeling away layers I had tried to keep hidden from the world. That a part of me wanted to push back, to tell him to stop, yet another part hesitated. In the emptiness of the desert, where no one else could hear us, his words carried a strange weight. They unsettled me, yet they also awakened thoughts I had kept buried. The boundaries between fear and curiosity blurred, and before I knew it, I was caught in the tension of something I couldn't control. The desert stretched endlessly around us, but inside that car, it felt like the walls were closing in. My instincts told me to demand he start the car and drive, yet I sat frozen, unable to move, as though destiny had paused in this moment to test me. Something irreversible was beginning, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to resist it or surrender to it. The air inside the car grew warmer, heavier, as though the desert heat had seeped into every corner of the vehicle. I shifted slightly, trying to steady my breath, but the driver's presence pressed closer, his gaze never leaving me. The hum of the silence was deafening, and for a moment it felt as if time itself had slowed down, trapping us in a place where the outside world no longer existed. He leaned back, exhaling a cloud of smoke that curled lazily before disappearing into the dry air. His voice dropped lower, softer, carrying with it a weight I couldn't ignore. He spoke of his own life, his struggles, his disappointments, the loneliness that came with long hours on empty roads. There was something raw in his confession, something that mirrored the emptiness I had tried so hard to hide within myself. It startled me, this sudden honesty, and it made me feel exposed in ways I wasn't prepared for. That I looked out at the horizon, where the sun was slipping behind the dunes, staining the sand with its final fire. The desert seemed infinite, yet in that moment it felt like a cage. There was no escape, no one to call, no one to witness what was unfolding. It was just the two of us, caught between silence and temptation, fear and desire. His hand brushed the steering wheel absently, but his eyes stayed locked on me, unwavering. I felt a chill despite the heat, a shiver that ran through me as though my body already knew the choice that loomed ahead. My thoughts screamed for clarity, reminding me of the consequences, of the betrayal this path could lead to, but my heart beat louder, drowning everything else in its restless rhythm. The driver didn't move closer, yet the space between us grew thinner, almost non-existent. Every glance, every pause, every unsaid word wrapped tighter around me, pulling me into a web I wasn't sure I could escape from. And somewhere in that fragile silence, I realized the truth. I was no longer in control of the situation. Something was about to happen, something that would change the way I saw myself forever. The desert outside stood still, the air trembling with anticipation, as if it too was waiting for my next move. The desert night crept in quietly, swallowing the last light of the sun until only a pale moon glowed above the dunes. The silence outside deepened, but inside the car, my heartbeat filled every corner. I could feel the shift. Something had already changed, even if no words had been spoken to name it. The driver's expression was steady, unreadable, as if he had been waiting for me to decide what came next. I turned my gaze to the window, hoping the endless horizon would give me clarity, but it only reminded me how far I was from everything familiar. No one knew where I was, no one could see me, and in that realization lay both danger and freedom. For the first time in a long while, I understood what it meant to stand at a crossroads where neither path was clean. His voice broke the silence again, low and deliberate. He told me he hadn't meant to stop the car, just to rest. He admitted he felt a pull toward me from the moment I sat down, something he couldn't ignore. His words struck hard, not because of what he felt, but because they echoed a part of me I hadn't dared to confront. The loneliness, the unspoken hunger for connection, the longing to be seen. It was all there, reflected back at me in his confession that I closed my eyes for a moment, caught between reason and desire, guilt and possibility. My mind painted the faces of those I would betray, the trust one would break, yet my heart beat louder, urging me to surrender to the moment. The air felt electric, charged with a choice that could not be undone once taken. When I finally opened my eyes, I realized the desert itself had become a witness, vast, silent, and eternal. What happened inside that car would remain hidden beneath its endless sands, a secret carried only by two souls bound in a fleeting, dangerous connection. And so the night unfolded, not with words, but with choices made in silence. Choices that would linger long after the desert had been left behind. Choices that would echo in my heart whenever I thought of the stranger who stopped his car in the middle of nowhere and changed the course of my story forever.